You were talking, I think last night, you'd been doing some research and you came across some article that talked about the four major predictors of divorce.
Yeah, I've been doing reading some articles and looking into some things just about what kind of makes quality relationships. So I started to kind of do the opposite a little bit and look at what are the biggest problems in relationship. Like, when do you really know you're having a problem, and what problems are really, really big indicators of heading in a bad direction. Yeah, so it was kind of interesting. Actually, I need to. It's more on my phone than on here. So I think a lot of people might know this, and I've heard this before and looked at it before, but I was reading more about it and looking more into it because I will say, and I never want people to think that we're like, oh, we have the perfect relationship. Um, yeah, we talked about that too last night. It was funny how perfect relationships would be. There's no such thing for one thing.
Yeah, nobody has a perfect
Nobody does.
relationship.
And everything I read was like, you don't even want that, because if you can't get through shit and learn and grow together, you don't have a very exciting relationship or interesting relationship. Or anyway, it's just not possible. So going on to the indicators of divorce, I'll name all four of them, and then we'll kind of talk about each one of them at a time. But
Okay.
criticism, contempt, which is in the same vein but different.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I've read before that's like one of the worst things.
That's what it says. It really does say. We'll have to get into it. That contempt is probably the worst, and it is a habit.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You were going to name the four
I
first.
was. Yes, honey. I believe interrupting was number 3.
Interrupting your wife was the number 3 worst violation.
It's the death nail. It's the death nail in the coffin of every relationship. So we're doomed.
Oh shit! All right.
Criticism, contempt, stonewalling. Yeah, and defensiveness. And then one list I looked at said, infidelity. I think infidelity certainly is definitely on the list.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't help.
No, it definitely would complicate any problem that you already have.
Let's go ahead and talk through each one.
I'm gonna have a sip of my wine, everybody, and we're gonna talk about criticism. Obviously, if you're a critical person, you're gonna have some trouble with any relationship, not just a romantic relationship.
So let's talk about criticism.
Yeah, criticism is a big subject because everyone can be critical and everyone has different ways of dealing with being criticized. So there's a lot to talk about there. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, and I think there's something out there that kind of misleads people too, because there's this whole constructive criticism thing that can be good. I mean, criticism can sometimes be helpful. Like we talk about it at work a lot. That you need to be able to accept some criticism that helps you get better at what you do. But I think that's really not where we're going, is it?
No, I mean it can be. I think that your ability to handle criticism or real input that's meant to make you better is important. I think criticism to me is criticism can be anything from you don't do this right, I don't like the way you do this bugs me, to criticism about appearance, to it's a huge plethora of things. Some things are much more damaging than others.
Yeah, and I don't care who you are, criticism always bites a bit.
And honestly, it depends on too, if you are upset because someone tells you they want you to turn the lights off and you perceive that as criticism, is that really criticism,
Yeah, I don't know, but you had a history where at least one relationship you were in, there was a lot of criticism.
Yeah, or a lot of comments about there's a lot of criticism, or at least a lot of comments about things that they thought I should do differently or better.
Yeah, and I think I think if you're going to criticize your spouse, you need to be very careful and do it with very kind-hearted.
Well, one of the things it says in this, in everything I read, was when criticism crosses a line where you're actually not criticizing a behavior, but you're criticizing someone's character or something about their person, then it really, really is a problem. When you start to say things like, I don't like the way you load the dishwasher, but you never do anything right.
Yeah, I see where you're going. Yeah.
Yeah, then that's a whole different thing. When you say, I don't know, say this is a serious thing, someone, I don't know, anything. When you start to say like, you're never honest, you never do this, I don't like the way you talk to people. When you start criticizing someone's
Yeah, I see where you're
character,
going now. Right.
I don't like the way you act when we go out together. When it
Yeah.
gets to be like that,
Yeah, that's pretty
really
deep. Yeah.
damaging.
Yeah, that's damaging.
That's not, I wish your side of the bathroom was a little neat. To me, that's a behavior change. I mean, that's a different, that's not really necessarily a criticism. That's just an honest, this is something you do that does kind of bother me. Can we work on it together? That's not criticism. That's partnership. That's
and that's communication.
That's
right?
communication,
and
right.
that's necessary and that's healthy. That if you have something that I do that's bothering you, I would prefer to get that out in the open so that we can make the adjustments or the compromises we need to make to make that not be a problem.
Yeah, but when if you're late coming home from work and I say, hey, would you let me know if you're going to be later than 5:30? I start to worry, or I just kind of want to know what to expect. That's different than if I say, I can never depend on you to be where you need. I can never depend on you. I never know.
Right.
You don't ever tell me anything, or when you start generalizing and really attacking someone's character, that's a bad sign in a relationship. And I think we all have to be really, really careful. They always talk about, we're all old enough now, if you've been in therapy at all, they talk about always using I statements and all that sort of stuff instead of you statements. And criticism can just really send you down a bad path where you're letting someone think that you don't like who they are. And when you get to that point, that's
that's pretty deep. That's damaging.
That's damaging. Right, that's damaging. And some people can take it better than others, but it's not healthy.
I agree.
So then the next one is contempt, and that's the big one, right? That's the big one.
Yeah, no, I'm
going to look it up because
I've read before that contempt is one of the worst. That like once you have contempt in a relationship, it can actually be difficult to repair.
It can be difficult to repair. And
but clear me up. I'm not sure I really understand what contempt is.
Contempt can be a form of criticism, but it's like, to me, contempt is when you really feel you're superior in the way that you think or do things or behave than your partner, and you act that way. You don't really give credence to what they're thinking or doing or feeling because, I don't know, you think you know better. I'll read a little bit here of what it says. It just says,
read about it.
Contempt is any statement or nonverbal behavior that puts yourself on a higher ground than your partner. Mocking your partner, calling them names, rolling your eyes, and sneering in disgust are all examples of contempt. And I think that's I think sometimes we do that. Like, we've been together long enough that people can do that, right? You can be like,
I'm guilty of rolling my eyes from time to time.
For sure. Eye rolling. But if you're kind of joking around, that's one thing. It's not fun to experience contempt from somebody that you love, and I think a lot of times, I'm assuming lots of times when behaviors start to go bad, that a lot of these problems are somewhat one-sided, but they definitely snowball. If someone's critical or someone's showing you contempt, then you become defensive, and we'll talk about defensiveness, and then there's this whole like, you're not ever getting anywhere.
So this contempt, I think I've heard at one point in time that contempt was kind of like considering the other person irrelevant.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Do you think that is true?
Yeah. This goes on to say that couples have to realize that these types of put downs will destroy the fondness and admiration between them. The antidote to contempt is to lower your tolerance for contemptuous statements and behaviors and to actively work on building a culture of appreciation in the relationship. I want to look up something else too, because I think there was something else that talked about it a way that I liked a little bit better. This says contempt, also known as the single greatest predictor of divorce, is when you attack your partner's character with a sense of moral superiority.
Yeah, that goes along with what I said. I've read before that contempt is really the worst. I mean, it's a very, very solid predictor of divorce.
So this gives an example. I don't know if this is a great example or not, but it says when you start to say or when you do things like, not only do you call your partner an idiot, you tell them how they are a horrible parent just like their mother. Not only have you criticized them, you have asserted yourself as the expert of morality and all things true.
Wow.
Yeah. I think possible that you may have known someone who did that. I don't know. But
moving along.
Contempt is a vile form of toxic hatred that strings to the core and corrodes the very presence of love. So that's why, in some ways, this contempt and criticism and some of the things we said with criticism, I think, kind of go together because, that is part of it.
It almost seems to me like it could start with criticism, and if it gets worse and worse, it could become contempt.
One thing that I've seen a lot in relationships, bad relationships, or heard of or experienced is you'll say something, say you're mad and you are having an argument, and your partner says to you, like, "Ugh, you're crazy." Like that, that's not helpful.
Isn't that kind of like gaslighting?
That is gaslighting.
That's what they call it,
That is gaslighting, but it's also contemptuous because it's like saying, I'm not even validating what you say. I'm just saying you're crazy. You're crazy. I'm not even going to listen to you. And I'm not saying that sometimes when we're in the heat of anger, we don't say crazy things, or if you say, you don't know what you're talking about, or I think all those things are pretty contemptuous. And honestly, I hate to even bring this up because I think that this happens in relationships and you don't realize that it's damaging when you start making even things that you think are cute, but they're really not. You kind of make your partner look bad, because it's cute. Like you say things about how ditzy they are, or that they never remember anything, or that you can't depend on them, or you just all those kind of undermining, to other people. I think is kind of a sign of contempt.
Yeah, it could be. So it's like contempt mild or something. But it can only get worse, right? I mean, you want to stay away.
Yeah, I in retrospect, and I hate to bring things, like I don't even want to, but I've seen things where people have said things that they thought were funny and everyone kind of laughed about them, but they're not good for a healthy relationship. Like someone said once that, they hoped their child was, had my, they said something like, I hope our child has my brains and your eyes.
Yeah, no, I get it.
That's not nice, right?
No, and those are those little things you never forget.
And you kind of laugh about it because everyone laughs. So like, they're not really saying you're stupid, but it's kind of shitty. It's like jokes that are kind of at your expense. To me, like, that's not something you definitely try not to do to your partner. The other thing is, I think that kids pick up on that more than you think. And they notice when there's not a real show of mutual respect between their parents.
Yeah, I think kids are very intuitive to that sort of thing.
Yeah, it might be later on that they kind of get it because everyone laughs and some of it doesn't seem that damaging. I've seen these dynamics in relationships and especially long-term families. You do kind of joke and you do kind of say things and but they're not really they're not really building each other up, right? So I think once you do reach that point where you have contempt for your partner or your partner is showing you contempt, that's really unhealthy. Nobody should have to put up with that.
Yeah, that's a tough place to come back from. I mean, I would say being that contempt is, we've both read probably the number one predictor of divorce. If somebody feels like they have that in their relationship, it's probably time to seek out counseling.
Right, I agree. Yeah, sorry, I was just looking. I was reading ahead, so I had some good comments for the next thing. But I agree.
No problem.
And
I was thinking about it.
I think part of the problem with these things is they creep into your relationship. I mean, really, really toxic relationships where you say, you're yelling at each other and calling each other horrible names, and that's a no-brainer, right? We all know those are unhealthy, but these things can really kind of creep into your relationship and just become habits that are unhealthy that kind of chip away at your feelings of love and fondness for each other.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, and so this list, I just want to make sure that I have it right because there's, like I said, there's more than one list.
So what have we talked about so far? We've talked about
criticism and contempt.
Criticism and contempt. You had two others.
Yeah, this list, I have to make sure that, did I say the same thing on both lists? This one, the next thing is defensiveness. Defensiveness is when you respond to criticism or contempt from your partner with the same level or form of criticism or contempt. Let's say your spouse criticizes you for being on the phone all the time, and your response would include retaliating with something like, I play on my phone all the time because you're always on your phone or because you never pay attention to. This is hurtful for the relationship because the communication is more problem-focused than solution-focused. Defensiveness abdicates responsibility, so no corrective measures can be taken to better the relationship. And what I've found is that most relationships that have one of it may be that some things are to more extent than the other, but when you can't say to someone, like when you say to someone, I really feel alone in this relationship, and they say, well, maybe you want to be somebody that I want to be around, or I don't know. I mean,
That's pretty sharp.
That's not, things like that.
That's pretty nasty.
Yeah, that's pretty nasty. Maybe that wasn't the best example. This one says defensiveness, same thing, but when you attempt to defend yourself from a perceived attack with a counter complaint, you are being defensive. Another way to be defensive is to whine like an innocent victim. Unfortunately, defensiveness keeps partners from taking responsibility for problems and escalate. Even if your partner is criticizing you, defensiveness is not the way to go. It will only fuel a bad experience. The antidote to defensiveness is to try to hear your partner's complaint and to take some responsibility for the that just really goes back to like poor communication, and I guess that is true. If someone does complain in a reasonably healthy way and you just respond with criticism, for instance, if you say to someone, hey, I'm really feeling like we need to do some work on our relationship, and their response is, I don't have any problem with our relationship, you're the problem, then you're not really gonna get very far, right? I mean,
defensiveness is an interesting one. I actually have a lot of experience with that in my professional life because I've been in a position leading people for years and years. So whether it's trying to have some level of accountability for a problem, or doing annual reviews, or whatever it is, I have a lot of experience with people being defensive. But one thing I've thought about with defensiveness before with myself is it can be very hard not to be defensive if you feel offended. So if that approach to that correction or whatever it is done in an offensive manner, the natural response is to be defensive. So the person making that criticism or that corrective action or whatever, you need to frame that in a way that's definitely not offensive, or else defensiveness is what you're going to get. And I think that's just kind of a human behavior thing. But the problem, I agree with one thing you said, is the problem is when a person is defensive, what they're doing is they're denying whatever the claim is. Once you're defensive, there's no way to correct whatever that behavior is or whatever that is that the claim's being made against. You're standing your ground and you're basically saying, no, there is not a problem. The problem has to be with you or with him. A lot of times people will, like in a work environment, people will say, well, Joe over there, he got by with it, so why can't I? And you get red herrings and all kinds of different things going on with defensive behavior that make the problems kind of hard to correct.
Yeah, and I think that it's really important because some people just can't handle, it kind of goes back to criticism. And sometimes to say like, when you do this or when you, whatever it is, when you slam the door or when you yell at me or it makes me feel really unsteady, I don't like that, can we talk about it? That's a really healthy way to bring things up, right? I mean, but then if someone responds with, well, if you wouldn't make me so mad, I wouldn't slam the door, you're like, well, fuck off. I mean, I don't want to say that. That's not, I go south, but, but I try to, not that I am perfect at all, but I think kids are a good example. But I remember times when my kids would tell me things and I really would always try to listen, I like, that's fair, so when someone says something to you that is fair, like when you do this, it really, really makes it hard to do X, Y, and Z, or really, really makes me feel whatever. I think it's important to be able to hear those things and be able to improve.
Yeah, and some of that's just communication skill.
Yeah, I have been through a lot of therapy. Have you ever been to the therapy where they made you pass the rock back and forth?
No, I never did any rock passing.
Wow.
What the hell's that about?
Well, it's one of those things. I always hated it.
You can't speak unless you're holding the rock.
Yes.
I get it.
Yeah, you can't speak unless you're holding the rock.
We might need a rock in our podcast to keep from talking over each other every once in a while.
And then you pass the rock, and then when you get the rock, the first thing you have to do is kind of repeat what the person said already. Like
it's active listening. Active skills.
Listening, yeah. What I hear you saying is.
Yeah, no, that's actually good.
What I hear you saying is, it really pisses you off when I put my clothes on the floor of the, bedroom and don't hang them up. Did I get it right? That's what they do in that shit, honey. You've never done that?
No, but...
Well, no wonder you got divorced.
I should have passed that fucking rock.
I'm just saying, it seems to work for us. I don't know.
Oh, shit.
Oh, I can be so funny. So Defensiveness is also on the list. And the last one is stonewalling.
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 Let's talk about stonewalling. I'm not, that's just walking away or not paying attention.
Shutting down.
Shutting down.
Shutting down, not listening, walking away. And then once you get to that point, and that does happen a lot. And honestly, sometimes it happens, I think, because people, when they get into when they're in a relationship that's not healthy and they have learned habits, lots of times they have the same conversation over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I think then I think one of the partners sometimes does check out. And then I also think it's possible. I'm not saying that the person who does this is right or wrong. I'm just kind of talking about reasons, in my opinion, that they happen. It could be that you are, I hate to say healthier, but it could be that you are not the more, you're not the one with more toxic habits in the relationship, but the other person has just, goes on and on and on with no solution. Always just, you're the problem. We need to talk about this ad nauseum, and you do just check out. You're like, fuck it, I'm not talking to. I mean, I'll sit here and listen, but I'm not really engaging in this conversation because it goes nowhere.
Yeah, because it just goes on, and there's no resolution.
Yeah, and on the opposite side, there could be someone who really is trying to come up with a solution, like, what do we need to do to fix this problem? I'm really concerned. And if the other person is checked out of that conversation, that's not going to be helpful. So I think all those things, criticism, contempt, how you handle criticism, or how you handle correction from your partner. Defensiveness,
yeah.
and then just checking out. And I think once you've checked out, then it's really hard to go back. I think once people in that stage in their relationship where they're checked out, it's hard to go back. And what I also have found is typically, and I could be wrong, I'm not an expert, but I have a lot of friends and I'm old. What I found is typically there's one person in the relationship who's more checked out than the other for whatever reason.
Yeah, and that's probably true.
And then once that happens, depending on why it happens and how long it takes to happen, it's hard for that person to necessarily re-engage, because if all the other things don't change, once you get to that point where you're checked out, if you can't say, like, we need help, we need to do things differently, we need to have new habits in our relationship, and we need to work on that together. If you're not both on that same page, how do you undo some of that? I don't know that that's even possible.
Yeah. So when you were talking, I thought of a question.
All right, honey, ask away.
The silent treatment, is that a form of stonewalling, do you think? Or is that something different?
To me, that's immature punishment.
Okay.
Now, I mean, it can
I've
be.
never had a lot of experience with the silent treatment, but I hear a lot. Through my life, I've heard a lot of guys talk about it. I've heard them talk about giving it and getting it.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. That's something that I thought about talking about. But to me, I can't say that if I've ever done it, it's been in very small degrees because I can't stay quiet that long.
I would agree.
So I'm not I like to resolve things. So I much more likely to talk about a problem that I have until I feel like it's all worked out in my head, and probably drive everybody else crazy with it. But honestly, when I say that, I do think that it's a bad habit that sometimes we learn from our caretakers when they withdraw affection from us for whatever reason. And I think it is a very immature form of punishment and manipulation. I really do. To try and pretend like someone's not present by not speaking to them, or to purposefully turn your back and not engage in a conversation with someone that you live with and someone that you love over some perceived, is just, in my opinion, a bad sign. It's just a real sign of immaturity.
Maybe not one of these major predictors, but
I think it falls
bad.
under. I think it can fall.
It's kind of like stonewalling, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of it's a bad habit. Anytime you deal with conflict in a way that's really meant to damage or hurt the other person by withdrawing affection or withdrawing attention, or making them behave a certain way before you'll talk to them again, that's very toxic and very ugly.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a very good sign. I mean,
and I might have led us down a irrelevant path.
No.
But when you were talking about stonewalling, I just thought about all the times I've heard people talk about, giving or receiving the silent treatment.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes what I think is, sometimes it happens. Like, you're irritated with your partner and you just, but then when someone says to you, hey, are you mad at me or what's going on, That's when you say, yeah, I am. And yeah, I think we all have little pieces of possibilities of being immature in our interactions. I might sulk a little bit in order to, with that, and I may not even realize it, sulk a little bit so that someone will say, hey, what's wrong? Are you upset about something?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to say, I'm upset about something and I really want you to make me feel better. You just want that to happen,
right.
But I think giving someone the silent treatment is manipulative. So this is interesting too. I don't know if we can, it says that most stonewallers are men, 80% are men.
Oh.
Women are talkers.
No, I could see that. Yeah, that makes sense.
But it says sometimes it looks like they've shut down, but sometimes that isn't the case. Typically, they are overwhelmed and are trying to calm themselves. So, unfortunately, this seldom works because the partner, especially if it's a woman, is likely to assume they don't care enough about the problem to talk about it. It can be a vicious cycle with one person demanding to talk and the other looking for escape. So, yeah, so I do think that can happen. Getting back to our things that we've talked about today, the biggest indicators of divorce, or I think just an unhealthy relationship, are criticism. Don't do that shit. No, criticism.
Yeah,
contempt. If someone treats you with contempt, tell them to fuck off. No, I'm just joking.
So you got
this is why I'm really not an advisor.
So you got criticism and contempt, which contempt, from what both of us have read, is probably the worst of all of them. But criticism, contempt, what else?
Defensiveness and stonewalling.
Defensiveness and stonewalling. So right there are your 4 major predictors of divorce. So as couples, we need to look out for that kind of stuff. And if we feel that creeping in, we need to get it addressed pretty quickly.
And one thing I have noticed, we talk about this, it's easy when you get older and you've been through therapy, you recognize these things. You can see that maybe sometimes they've happened or creeped into a relationship that you have that you didn't even realize it was happening, but it happened and it caused damage. It's easier to recognize those things and not bring them forward with. And so I think that's why sometimes it's easier, when you start over again. If you're able to be reflective and say, these things didn't go well before, I've seen this in other relationships and I don't want that to be in my relationship. And also, it also gives you the ability to, when you're dating, if you see some of those red flags in someone, if someone's doing those things when you're dating, it's not a really good sign. Those are the 4 indicators of divorce or of an unhealthy relationship. And
no, it was an interesting subject tonight, man. And if you got anything out of the show, do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. Click the notification bell so that it lets you know when we got new shows up. We got a lot of things on the docket that we're going to do, and we certainly hope you're there. Thank you so much.
thank you.